We're in this series called We Don't Talk About That, trying to change that into We Talk About That. And the past couple of weeks we talked about government and politics, and last week we talked about racism, and certainly it's my hope as your pastor that this has initiated more conversations. I find that sometimes the conversation that's the easiest one to initiate is, we don't agree with the pastor. That's positively not the point. You can disagree with me anytime, and that's fine. Hopefully we'll still love each other very well. The point is when we have conversation, it's really important to open up the Scriptures on these issues and to look at the Scriptures and to examine these issues in light of that. Because as I prayed, the megaphone of what's going on in the world is incredibly loud. So this morning I'd invite you to turn to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5, and we're going to read verses 1 through 16 of Ephesians 5. And we're talking about protection of life this morning. Just so you know, as we talk about protection of life, there's a variety of issues that we can talk about under this umbrella, of which if I talked about them all, we'd be here at least until 2 o'clock. And so today I've picked a topic that's very relevant, and that is the topic of abortion. And I will talk about a few other things as related to protection of life, but in a very brief manner. But this whole idea of protection of life does encompass other issues as well. So I'd invite you to stand for Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1-16. Listen to these scriptures in light of what we're talking about today. Listen to these scriptures in terms of what God would have us be in this world today. Beginning at verse 1, therefore be imitators of God as dearly loved children, and walk in love as Christ also loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrificial and fragrant offering to God. But sexual immorality and any impurity or greed should not even be heard of among you, as is proper for saints. Obscene and foolish talking or crude joking are not suitable, but rather giving thanks. For know and recognize this: every sexually immoral or impure or greedy person who is an idolater does not have an inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty arguments, for God's wrath is coming on the disobedient because of these things. Therefore, do not become their partners. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the light consists of all goodness, righteousness, and truth, testing what is pleasing to the Lord. Don't participate in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what is done by them in secret. Everything exposed by the light is made visible, for what makes everything visible is light. Therefore it is said, get up, sleeper, and rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Pay careful attention then to how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time, because the days... Read the last words. Because the days... Oh, we got cut off there. May God bless the reading of the word to your hearts. This is the word of the Lord. Amen. You may be seated. So pastoral confession, I always print the words in my notes here because I'm got terrible eyes, so I got to blow them up so big. Someday I'll finish that passage. Making the most of every opportunity. Thank you, Sue. Because the days are evil. Yes, that's exactly what I meant to read. I appreciate that very much. You notice at the beginning of this passage, what's very important as we're in this series, we're talking about thinking biblically and acting biblically. So right out at the beginning it says, and walk in love. Walk in love. Because on issues such as we talk about today, there obviously is a path of love and there's not a path of love. You know, sometimes when we disagree with people, we put this up. And that's not what God calls us to do. We walk in love. Matter of fact, even as we're walking through this passage and walking through the issue of today, think of how we can love. Think of how we can be Christ to others. How can we be Christ to others, even those others who we may disagree with? I remember it was January of 1973. I was 11 years old. In my little Orthodox Presbyterian church that I went to, the Sunday night service started at 5 o'clock. There was about 30 people there every Sunday night. And we did that thing that many churches did at that time. The pastor took prayer requests from the people that were there. And I will not forget this moment. Why? I'm not sure, but I remember this. Ralph Lubin, who was one of the elders in our church, raised his hand for a request, and he said, "Please pray for our country in light of the recent Supreme Court decision made on Roe versus Wade, which makes abortion legal." I had no idea what abortion was. I was 11 years old, and of course, as an 11-year-old, I wasn't quite sure whether I cared about it. But then as time went on, I learned exactly what it was. I learned that it actually had a personal meaning for my own life. Because of my own story, and it's the only one that I have, many of you know I was adopted. I was actually adopted January 17th, 1962. And I have to be honest with you, I'm glad it was 1962 and not 2019. As I pieced together stories that I've gotten from my birth family, my mother had passed away prior to my knowledge of this, but I found out a couple years ago, actually, that I was the result of a 5-beer night. Hope it was good beer. But you know, what happened is something that was unplanned. It was a crisis for my mother. And I am grateful. I am grateful for the way that God intervened in that. See, my mother was, whether she was going to church or not, or following what she had been raised in, she was a part of a very, very strong, tight little community in upstate New York, and they were very conservative Baptists. This would not go over well in 1961 when all this happened, actually probably 1960. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful that God used significant people in her life to let her know that this was not the end for her and certainly not the end for me. For a few years, I served on the board of Bethany Christian Services in Southern California. Story after story of young women who had made an unwise choice to get pregnant, but through God's redeeming love made a great choice in choosing adoption. And we saw literally throngs of kids being raised in loving Christian homes while still having some relationships, even with their birth moms. This was redemption at work. I remember speaking at this once in a church on a Sunday, and a woman after the message came up to me with just a heartfelt concern on her face, and she said, "Please, please, if you know of anyone who is considering an abortion, would you please give them an opportunity to talk to me? I've had one." And she said, "I'm wondering if God would use me in the life of another woman to spare her the pain that I've gone through because of that." In our last church, we had a lady who had 6 abortions, and her life is completely committed to Jesus Christ. She knows that Christ's redemption is there for her. She's gone through immense hurt and heartache in her life, but now belongs firmly in the grip of her faithful Savior, Jesus Christ, knowing that she's a daughter of the King, and she works tirelessly to come alongside of women in crisis and protect the lives of the unborn. This is not the unpardonable sin. We must come alongside of anybody who's in crisis. But one of the things that has certainly prompted abortion, even in Christian communities, is the way that Christians can behave towards this. Dear people, may that never be said of us. May we have our arms open to receive and to love and come alongside and let them know that this place is a womb of grace. So let's talk about what's happening. Well, what's happening for those who might be a little bit unfamiliar with what the laws are, When the American Medical Association formed in 1847, abortion was commonly practiced in what they called before quickening, before movement. But through the efforts of the AMA and others, abortion became illegal everywhere in the United States by 1900. The key reversal of this legal situation happened on January 22, 1973, when the Supreme Court, in the case of Roe v. Wade, made the following rulings. This is what they did. That no state may make laws regulating abortion during the first 3 months of pregnancy, except to provide that the abortions be provided by licensed physicians. And that laws regulating abortion between the 3rd month and the time of viability are constitutional only in as far as they are aimed at safeguarding the health of the mothers. And that the health of the mother includes all factors: physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age, and anything related to the well-being of the patient. Then on July 1st, 1976, the court extended its original decision to affirm this: that abortion may be performed on minor daughters without the knowledge or consent of their parents, and that women, whether married or unmarried, may obtain abortions without the knowledge or consent of a baby's father. In effect, therefore, the law of our land today is that any abortion is legal in America up until birth. If the mother can give reason that the pregnancy or the child will be an excessive burden or stress on her well-being. That's the law. The statistics in 2015, 885,000 abortions were performed in America. The number in many places in America is actually going down. For that we give thanks. But the total amount of abortions performed in America since 1973 is right at about 60 million. 60 million. When I was researching this, I realized, starting with myself, that this has been such a common thing in our country that I had become somewhat anesthetized to it. It doesn't affect me like it used to. For that I had to repent. 60 million. I came in this morning, and I'm sure that this was of the Lord that I had this happen. I didn't seek them out, but I walked in that door over there, and who did I get to see but little Maverick Chapman with cheeks that are like this big. Beautiful child. I can't imagine them without that little child. I can't imagine that our country and its laws says that up to the prior point that little Maverick was born, that it was okay to kill him. Walked up and was greeting people at the greeting time and saw little Chip Brofart all dressed in his suit. Beautiful child. Cannot imagine that just prior to his birth it'd be okay to kill him. 60 million. You say, Pastor Bob, you're making too big of a thing out of this. Most abortions are done in the first trimester. And that's correct. That's correct. But what we have to get into the bedrock of our belief system from the Bible, of which I hope by the end of the message that this will biblically be inside of you, is that does personhood start when a child comes out of the womb? Or does it start somewhere else? That's the key thing. We have to work from an absolute somewhere in here. Because right now we're working from the absolute that a child who is born, according to the law, is a person, but moments before they're not a person. And that's something that I believe certainly is in direct conflict with the Scriptures. According to the United Nations, only 9 countries have a higher abortion rate than the United States. The highest percentage of pregnancies ending in abortion, District of Columbia, 38%. And that, of course, on the downside is less than 2% of pregnancies end up in abortion in Wyoming. 86% of abortions are performed on unmarried women, and women in their 20s account for the majority of abortions. 89% of all abortions happen in the first trimester. My wife and I, when we had our children, it seems like the old days now, but you only received an ultrasound when there was something bad going on. So we didn't have one of those little pictures of our first 2 children, and then we had one with our 3rd child a day before our Charlie was born, just because we were post-mature, and it was fun. We saw that he was a boy, saw very clearly he was a boy, and it was fun to have that picture. It was the first time I had a picture. Well, now, when people become pregnant, it's amazing. You see them on Facebook, people have them, and it's just very exciting. Why is it exciting? Because it's a person. Because they're anticipating a baby. And because it's not long after that there's a heartbeat. And so people will post them. People will put them on their refrigerator. When we got it of our grandchildren, we were so excited. And that's, I believe, how God intended that to be. Why is this happening? Why is this happening in the world? Why is this happening in our country? Why has this become so acceptable? Well, the news is very clear from Scripture. First of all, we've made a god of self. Self. The Bible says in James 4:2, you desire and do not have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and wage war. You do not have because you do not ask. So you desire and do not have, so you kill or you murder. Desire what? Well, sometimes the desire is financial security. Sometimes it's more leisure. Sometimes it's more education. Sometimes it's more unrestrained activity. Sometimes it's career options or the avoidance of a child who may be handicapped, or maybe it's just a hassle. We desire, and that desire may be good or bad. And then there's a pregnancy, the beginning of a divine work. This is a divine work. Pregnancy is a divine work. It's a divine work of person forming in the womb. It's a divine work, dear people. We're made in the image of God. This isn't some sort of little biological transaction that we can start or end based upon our choice. This is divine work going on. And sometimes when that happens, desires are threatened. The pregnancy threatens them. The child is going to cost money or cramp things. So what happens? According to James, we kill. We live as a culture, in a culture where self rules. If God is the giver of life in the womb, we then turn from Him to another God, and that's the God of self. Lord, we don't trust you. We're not going to ask you. We're not going to make you the priority. We're going to make us the priority, and we're going to end it. And then, why is this happening? I hope this doesn't surprise any of you. The ruler of this world is a murderer. The ruler of this world is Satan. God is sovereign, but Satan is running around. Listen to this. You are of your father, the devil. That's what Jesus is talking about. And you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he tells a lie, he speaks from his own nature, because he is a liar and the father of lies. The devil is a murderer. The devil is a liar. The devil seeks to take The devil may have promises that are alluring, just going back to Genesis 3, but the devil's end game, listen to this, the devil's end game is always to kick you to the curb. Always. Lies, steals, and destroys. And that's what the devil does. And so it's no surprise that in our country that it's come to this. Why has abortion on demand reached such awesome proportions in our land? Because beneath the talk is the agenda of Satan, who has been a murderer from the beginning. Remember Ephesians chapter 6, of which is the next page in the scripture that we read this morning. Our battle isn't between flesh and blood. There is a powerful battle going on between good and evil in this world. And then why is this happening? We do not submit to God and resist the devil. James 4:7. Therefore submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. A heart that's submitted to God, no matter what, will find grace. Grace that will deal with the desires that would lead to killing a baby. Resist the devil. Well, let's talk about public opinion and what's going on out there. Interaction, so what people will say is the reason that you need to have abortion is this, and there's a whole bunch of reasons out there and rationale given to defend it. And they'll say interaction and survival outside of the womb is not possible. So in other words, this preborn is not a person. They can't survive, so stop calling them a person. Well, it's interesting because that there have actually been states, including Iowa, that have tried to get this fetal heartbeat bill through, because the rationale there is if we determine that death happens in a person when their heart stops beating, that's when the time of death is announced, then why wouldn't it make sense that life starts when a fetal heartbeat starts beating? Now, I actually believe, and I think the scriptures make a case, that life begins at conception. But 3 to 4 weeks into a pregnancy, there's a heart that's beating. And certainly, right then, if that baby was outside of the womb, it would not be able to live on its own. But certainly a newborn baby would not be able to live on its own either if it's fully healthy. It's dependent on others. Certainly a person in a coma can't live on their own. There's a whole host of other people that can't live on their own without assistance. And you think about the implications of what that rationale means for so many humans who are living right now, that they can't live on their own. And what about birth defects? Shouldn't someone have the right to perform an abortion if it would cause suffering for the child, not to say an incredible hardship on the family? Well, again, I ask the question, what happens after the child is born? What happens if a defect happens after the child is born? Should we be allowed to terminate the life of that child then? What happens when brain injuries occur in children because of perhaps accidents? When I served in a college a few years ago, one of our campuses was on, there was a hospital there. It was called Totally Kids, Sun Valley, California. And Totally Kids was devoted to children with brain injuries, many who had experienced them in accidents of some sort. And they were in an unbelievably loving environment, and every one of those children, whether they could respond or not, they were children made in the image of God. And Lord have mercy, I hope we never come to the point where we would feel that we have the right to terminate those lives. What about all the children that are living great lives with birth defects even right now? I had the opportunity recently to go and see little Everett Borgman. Some of you have Facebook or been over there, you've seen him. Everett was born with a lot of health issues. And he looks like a big boy right now, and Kate and Luke pulled him up there in the crib, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh, I love you, Everett. I prayed for you a lot." And this big smile came upon his face. He's a child. He's going to be raised to be a giant for Jesus. What about rape and incest? That's often used, and this is a terrible, terrible thing for a woman to go through. Terrible. I don't minimize this a bit. But does that child lose its right to live because of the circumstances of the birth? That's the question. One of the churches that we served, we had a beautiful lady who had a child prior to her coming to our church. It was literally in another part of the country, and that child was conceived as a result of a rape. I'll never forget when I heard that she shared this literally in her life group one night, and a man came to me the next day and he says, "I've always been for abortion for those who were raped or an incestual relationship." Until I heard Sarah's story and her daughter, who was beautiful and loves the Lord today, is 18 or 19 years old. How about if the life of the mother is in danger? Less than 0.01% of all abortions occur because of these circumstances, and I believe that this is an extremely difficult situation, and I don't believe that the Bible would deem that this is morally wrong. How about restraining a woman's freedom? This is where the term pro-choice and reproductive freedom come in. Shouldn't this solely be the responsibility of the woman? Some people have even gone so far as to say, and I've seen politicians say this over the years, that personally I'm against abortion, but I believe it is up to the woman. This will probably raise the most debate with people, and some may even suggest that a person standing up in front of this church as a man shouldn't even be talking to this at this time. Folks, I believe that our freedoms are restrained in many ways. All of your freedoms are restrained in many ways. I mean, there's just a long list of things that the government says you can do and you can't do. I'm not allowed to drive while intoxicated. I'm not allowed to steal my neighbor's car. Parents aren't allowed to put their children to death. If in fact the preborn child is a person, which we believe they are, then why would that restrain freedom when we don't allow parents to kill their children once they are born? Some would use the argument children should be wanted. One sitting U.S. Senator right now on his website, it says basically this: it doesn't matter your view on choice or contraception. He says, what we desire is to ensure that all children are wanted children. Of course, the same argument applies. If you can do it then, why shouldn't you be able to do it once they're out of the womb if they weren't wanted? You know, Francis Schaeffer, a Christian philosopher you might have heard of, along with the former Surgeon General of the United States from the 80s, C. Everett Koop, they wrote a book, and I'd certainly invite you to look at the new revised edition. The book was called Whatever Happened to the Human Race, and I believe it was written at the end of the 1970s. And one of the things that they said with the decision on abortion, which had only taken place a few years earlier than that, but has turned out to be a hugely prophetic message. If you cheapen life here, what has always been considered life, if you cheapen life here, what you are going to do is find a cheapening of life over here. And over the decades since then, we've seen that. So we've seen a rise in euthanasia. Matter of fact, assisted suicide is something that takes place, commonplace in some states where it's legal. And we've seen rises in child abuse, and we've seen just rises in all sorts of awful things that we do to people. Because when we cheapen life, it ripples out to other areas. Sin is always progressive. It's very sad. And so when we think about that and the cheapening of life, and people should have the right to take their life of this or that, you know what? Sometimes children are a hassle. Sometimes grandma and grandpa are a hassle. Amen? But think about where that goes. Nobody's going to walk over to Jefferson Place or the cottages and look at people and say there's no quality of life. End it. Nobody. I hope nobody. But we are in a country right now that is on a fast track to doing exactly that. Christians, this is often used, Christians should stop imposing their morals. I love it. Look at where our laws came from. Make no mistake, the laws of this land, the very formation of the laws of this land, were the result of Christian biblical morality. So which moral standards support laws against abortions? These are the morals. People should not be allowed to murder other people. Okay? That's one of the morals. People should not be allowed to murder other people. And the second moral, and there's only two, is the preborn child should be considered a person and therefore protected as a person. Those are the two morals. Those are the two morals. And then the final thing that what's the arguments against this? We need, and it's a misprint in your outline, we need a consistent ethic of life. So in recent years, this has been very divisive amongst Christians. And there are Christians, strong evangelical Christians at times, that will say, you make such a big deal about abortion, like abortion's the only issue out there. Abortion's not the only issue, they'll say. You got to talk about war, you've got to talk about poverty, you've got to talk about capital punishment, you got to talk about mass incarceration, you got to talk about nuclear weapons, you got to talk about gun control. It's not just abortion. You have to have a consistent ethic of life. And you know what? I agree. We have to talk about all those issues. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this series. We have to talk about all those issues. But all of these issues cannot diminish the effect of 60 million deaths. None of them. They're just not on the same plane, folks. Let's talk about what the Bible says, and we're going to close. This is brief, and I'm just going to give you some quick little stories, things that you can look up later. We look at Ephesians 5 this morning. It talks about light and darkness, and I want you to know, even as I say these things, my desire is about being biblical this morning. My desire isn't about being a Democrat or about being a Republican. I don't give a rip about those things. It's about being biblical. And what does the scripture say this morning? For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. That's what we're called to be. Live as children of light. Light consists of goodness, righteousness, and truth. Testing what is pleasing to the Lord. We need to cry out to the Lord, what is pleasing to you, Lord? Because what happens is the further we get away from this, the further we get away from listening to this, what happens is immediately the voices of what we hear in culture overtake. And then we ignore this. We don't even want to pull it out anymore and talk about it. We just go with the prevailing opinion that's out there. We must listen to this. Don't participate, Ephesians 5 said, in the fruitless works of darkness, but instead expose them. Beautiful from Luke chapter 1. You've heard this before. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped inside her. What leaped inside of her? A baby leaped inside her, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Then she exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you amongst women, and your child will be blessed. How could this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For you see," excuse me, "when the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby leaped for joy inside of me." A baby. Psalm 51:5, David says, "Indeed, I was guilty when I was born. I was sinful when my mother conceived me." David is acknowledging that his sinfulness didn't start when he was born. His sinfulness started when he was conceived. He was born in sin. And of course, our theology supports that as well. Psalm 139, of which Seth had on the screen earlier, thank you. For it was you who created my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's wombs. God's handiwork is taking place in a mother's womb. It is a divinely formed body. It's a person that's being formed by God's own handiwork. In Genesis 25, I love this. But the children inside her struggled with each other, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb. Now that's something. Some of you women have had big babies. Can you imagine 2 nations? And the Lord said to her, well, 2 nations are being formed in your womb. 2 peoples will come from you and be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will be serving the younger. Anybody remember who these little kids are? Jacob and Esau, yeah. Babies in the womb, struggling already. Persons, people. The Bible calls us to be salt. You are the salt of the earth. The salt of the earth. That's who we're supposed to be out there. Salt. It has a use in this world. But if it's no longer salty, but the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled. People of God, don't give up our saltiness. That's who we're called to be. And it goes on to say you're to be light, a light of the world. We're a light to shine in darkness, not to put out the light and blend into darkness. And so, as we shine light into darkness, please, 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 please act biblically. Consider and promote adoption. Promote it. Sometimes it even might require us, because of the own resources that we have, is to help somebody else adopt, because it's immensely expensive in so many cases. Talk about the truth. In love, just talk about the truth. Talk about the truth from Scriptures. Give to crisis pregnancy centers. Help volunteer. Women who are in crisis pregnancies need good women to be around them and to help them. And please pray, 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 pray. Martin Luther, which is a person that many of you have heard of, I found this quote this week, and it's profound for the church. If I process with the loudest voice and clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God, except precisely that point which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, I am not confessing Christ. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proven, and to be ready and to be steady on all the battlefronts besides is mere flight and disgrace if they flinch at that point. Now, this is the word for the church. We can preach sermons every week here. You can go to Bible studies every week. And if you're not going and fighting the battle where the battle is, all you do is get fat heads. Me too. We get fat heads. We know all the Scripture. We know the answer when the pastor asks a question. Folks, there's a battle raging out there. There's a battle going on out in the world. The devil loves it when churches don't engage in these discussions. The devil loves it when we get sucked into what the world thinks. So Luther is pointing this out 500 years ago. I can preach all of the Bible, but if I miss out where the devil is taking casualties right and left, and the devil is taking casualties on a variety of issues, war, gun control, all these sorts of things. The devil's taking casualties. Today we're talking about abortion. 60 million. Don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. The Lord's calling us into action. Let's pray. Father, we confess when we have not been involved as we should, starting with even understanding what your word would say about an issue that truly is so tragic. For all of us in this room, we can remember, whether we lived through it or not, that there were 6 million image bearers killed in terrible concentration and death camps in World War II. And when we see those images, and some of us have visited places like Auschwitz, and we say, how could that happen? 6 million people. And then we hear this morning 60 million, and Lord, none of us want to see those images. And the pastor didn't even want to put them on the screen of little children at various levels of a pregnancy being terminated. Absolutely, in so many cases, scientifically proven that they are experiencing pain. So just as a little baby comes out of a womb and is in need of its mother and its family and is crying and it wants to be fed, so that little baby inside of a womb is longing for safety and security to be nourished so that that body can grow. And we kill them over and over and over again. And we believe that this breaks your heart. And so, Lord, it must break our heart. Oh, God, have mercy. Please, Lord, help us to be the salt and the light you've called us to be. And it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.